First, I'm going to start by introducing you and welcoming you in my language. So, Flahayam, Kwatamaika Naiga Shiske, Nim Pulaski Stosto. It's like, welcome, how are y'all? And my indigenous name is Pulaski Still. And I'm from the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. That's about halfway to the coast from here. Our tribes all thrived on this very land we're on right now before memory, right? And so I was at an event here, so I want to kind of tell you how this started. I was at an event here, and I was speaking about the coroner and police accountability, that I was on the Police Accountability Commission. And the proprietor, Vin, and I really want to thank them for allowing me to do this, but after the event, you know, he was just like, I really need you to come and do an event here. This is so needed. He's a young black man, right? And he wanted other people to hear about what happened on the Police Accountability Commission and why we, Letha, in her marches and me on the corner, we're still out there protesting and for Black lives and police accountability. Because I kind of ran it down to him in a summary of how this, our community, our political leaders, through every barrier in our path they possibly could to prevent the police to be accountable for the egregious things they do. And so anyway, I was like, let me think about it. And I was wondering how I'd pay for it, but they were so insistent that I do this that they got a grant to cover it. And so, yeah. And I was like, just trying to figure out how am I going to do this. I go, let's just bring the two people here that are still out there, why we're still out there, and bring it to community members who've never experienced the coroner or JFPK or know what the fuck's going on with the police accountability. You know, they voted for it, and that's about as far as it went, right? So we just need to reach a farther audience. And so even though this is a small audience, you know, I'm grateful that y'all are here because then you can pass along the information. And we have lots of it on the tables here. So anyway, we're going to start with a land acknowledgement. And that, you know, I remember when they first started land acknowledgements, they fell kind of flat, you know, like, and what was even worse, they were asking us, Indigenous folks, to do land acknowledgements. It's like, something didn't feel right about that. It's like, we don't need to acknowledge this land as ours, you know? We need the descendants of the colonizers and the people who aren't indigenous to this land to acknowledge whose land they're on. And so after hearing many different land acknowledgements, I had asked Matt, Dr. Levine, to do one. And it was one of the most thorough, one of the most compassionate, you know, it had reparations in it, which many of the other ones didn't, and how to do that. And so that's why I chose them to do the land acknowledgement for today. And so let me introduce you to Dr. Matt Levine, who will do an amazing land acknowledgement, I'm sure.
Well, thank you, Charlie. Not just for the introduction, but for all that you do that is visible here, and the things that are not visible here as well. I mean, I think trying to recognize all it is that you do for this world and for this community, it's daunting to even try to figure out how to sum it up. As I think about on any particular day, In the morning, you might be going out to pick up some burritos to distribute around food pantries for folks experiencing food insecurity in our communities. When you get done, you might be getting a protest ready somewhere in the city that when you get done with the protest, you're going to go pick up some tarps and tents to bring to unhoused folks. That once you're done with that, you might go speak truth to power at Shitty Hall while you are on the Police Accountability Commission, and then coming home to set an example for us. That's one of the things that I can't possibly appreciate enough is the example you set for us, especially with that wonderful wisdom from 12-step programs of one day at a time. I know so many of us are trying to figure out what to do about this fucked up white supremacist world we find ourselves in. And having you as that rock, always thinking, how do I do better today than I did yesterday, and how do I do better tomorrow than I did today, is just an unbelievable privilege for all of us in this community. So if folks don't mind, I'd love for us to just make a little noise for Charlie to kick shit off. All right, so in terms of thinking about land, labor, and people acknowledgements, it's always difficult for me to think about where to start, knowing that acknowledgements can be a super, super important thing, and acknowledgements can be taken over by performative whiteness, especially in a city like what's now known as Portland. And so I wanted to start just by naming, in my mind, what the point is. In my mind, point number one when it comes to thinking about land acknowledgements is those of us who are not indigenous to this land recognizing and acknowledging and committing ourselves to be a part of Land Back, to be a part of getting indigenous land back into indigenous hands. And so I want to start there and recognize the fact that there simply is no United States without settler colonialism. There is no United States without anti-indigenous theft of land and life and anti-black theft of labor and life. And I think it's important too when we say that in a place like Portland where there is such a tendency to say, well, to distance ourselves from issues, to say, well, that's a thing over there. I think it's important to name there is no Portland without settler colonialism. There is no Portland without anti-indigenous theft of land and life. There is no Portland without anti-black theft of bodies, labor, and life. And so that means to me that every one of us here who is not indigenous to this land owes an unbelievable debt to the many indigenous peoples of the lower Columbia River, what's known as the Wimal in Chinook Wawa. All of the Klickitat peoples, Cowlitz, Cayuse, Umatilla, Shasta, Umpqua, Tualatin Kalapuya, and many other indigenous peoples of the lower Columbia River, indigenous peoples of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, indigenous peoples of the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, indigenous peoples of the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. We owe a continual debt. And to even begin to appreciate that debt, in my mind, we must remember the genocides and ecocides that have happened to the indigenous peoples of this land, and if we are to be in solidarity with indigenous peoples, to remember what has happened to the land and the non-human relations around us. So when we sit here and take a look at what a beautiful day it is today, Are we thinking about the fact that those number of beautiful days are changing from year to year because of the horrific violence that white supremacy has committed against the land and the peoples of this land and the non-human animals, the non-human relations of this land? And so we must remember the continued effects of colonial violence on indigenous bodies today, not just abstractly, but in our own communities here in what's now known as Portland. We must remember the femicidal situation in this city, in this state, in this country, which leads to missing and murdered indigenous women, girls, and two-spirits. And as we sit here in the middle of Pride Month, we must always remember to racialize our movements for LGBTQ2S+ liberation, to racialize our movements for femme liberation, to racialize our movements against other forms of oppression, remembering that homophobia, sexism, classism, and ableism always land hardest on our BIPOC comrades and on our BIPOC community members, especially here in lily white-ass Portland. And so, with all that in mind, we must remember that acknowledgements are not just an opportunity to do truth-telling about the horrors that indigenous communities and Black communities have faced. It's also a time for us to lift up and celebrate and commit to solidarity with the resistance and resilience of those indigenous and Black communities. And so I really hope that's the frame we come into today, and we remember that commitment as we listen to Charlie today, as we listen to Letha today, as we listen to Faith today, as we listen to Kevin today. And importantly, really want to encourage us as we think about a land acknowledgement and what it means for us to be in solidarity with that land back movement. Are we listening to Indigenous community members? And so, D-Link, if you're able to back there, could you move one slide forward, please? So this here is a document that comes from the Indigenous Leadership Program at EcoTrust, badass environmental justice organization here in what's now known as Portland. It's a document called From Acknowledgement to Action. And it's a document that encourages us, if we are in spaces where we're feeling the need to do things like offer a land acknowledgement, are we doing so in ways that we're actually listening to Indigenous community members and actually committing ourselves to actions that will allow us to, again, be in solidarity with rather than run roughshod over and assume we know what's best. And so wanted to have these 8 calls to action from the Indigenous Leadership Program at EcoTrust as a frame for thinking about going into our time today, and not just how can we listen to and be in solidarity with the folks that are up here, but how can we listen to and be in solidarity with the larger Indigenous community here in what's now known as Portland, but again, which is actually occupied, unceded, ancestral lands of many and different Indigenous peoples of the lower Columbia River. Again, Klickitat peoples, Umpqua peoples, Shasta peoples, Chinook peoples, Tualatin and Kalapuya peoples, and many, many more who have called this place home for generations longer than, for instance, myself. And so really appreciate folks giving some time and energy and attention to that. And with that, want to turn it over to my badass colleague, Dr. Kevin Wright.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Is this on? Test. Okay. Thank you so much, Matt. I really do appreciate that land acknowledgement. And as a gentle reminder for folks, alluding to what Matt has already mentioned that with land acknowledgements, it's a great initial foundational first step. It is not the be all end all call to action, so to speak. We all have a responsibility in this work, and it is very important for us to take some time to understand where our place is within this movement. And one of the things that we wanted to take some time to do is also remind folks that this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. And what I mean by that is that sometimes it can be very easy to get exhausted in this work. It can be very draining. It can be very daunting. It can even sometimes feel like nothing's ever going to change. That is a very human thing to feel, to think, to experience, to perceive. And at the same time, it is very crucial that while we are doing this work, while we are engaging with one another, while we are showing up in solidarity with one another, we are also taking the time to do what is best for ourselves, especially for our bodies. There is research that has been proven that if you are a person that comes from a historically marginalized community in this country that we now know as the United States, social injustice, racial injustice, homophobia, ableism, anti-blackness, indigenous erasure, et cetera, all these things can impact you on a molecular level. That's how deep this shit goes. It's impacting our respiratory system, our cardiovascular system, our nervous system. It's not just impacting, us mentally, it's impacting us holistically. So therefore, when we are doing this work, while I appreciate everyone showing up and showing out as best as they can, we also got to be mindful of how we are taking care of ourselves in this work. How are we taking the time to rejuvenate ourselves? How are we taking the time to center our accomplishments, center our health, center our joy in the moments that it truly matters, right? And then still staying involved and staying engaged in this movement with one another. So one of the things that we wanted to do is do a little bit of a mindfulness activity. Some of our work is informed and influenced by Resmaa Menakem's book, My Grandmother's Hands. If you all are not familiar with this book in any capacity, highly recommend it. It's a very great book. It's very an accessible read, in my opinion. And one of the things that it focuses on all throughout the text is how we are taking the time to listen to our hearts and listen to our bodies, and how are we taking the time to truly heal as best as we can when we are experiencing racialized trauma. So one of the things that I wanted to do is to guide us through our mindfulness activity, just because I want to acknowledge that many of you, all of you even, are coming from another place. You probably have another engagement to go to after this event. Tomorrow's Monday, so I know that many of us got to go to work tomorrow, got to go to school tomorrow. We all have different responsibilities. So there's probably a lot of things going through your mind right now. And at least for me sometimes, and Matt and I have talked about this often, Sundays are sometimes the worst days for us, because all we do is just end up thinking about the week. We actually don't take the time to just rest and to just be with ourselves and center ourselves in the moment. So we want to take some time to make sure that we're doing that before we get involved with this very rich discussion that we're about to have with these amazing panelists. So with that being said, I want you all to think of a person, a place, or an animal, or a thing that reminds you of wholeness, that reminds you of safety, that reminds you of security. If you feel comfortable, please close your eyes as you're thinking about this person, this place, this animal, this thing that reminds you of safety, security, wholeness. If this person, place, or thing or animal has a name, say it to yourself. Imagine that you are at that place. Imagine that this person or animal or thing is near you. Think about how these things make you feel. Think about what happens with your body when you think of these things. Do your shoulders relax? Does your jaw unclench? Does your mind settle down a little bit? Are you able to breathe better? Are you able to put your feet flat on the ground? We want folks to come into this space and truly center themselves and center this moment. We are navigating through so many things on a daily basis that it is okay for us to have the audacity to simply just be in this space be in solidarity with one another, and simply just be. I want you all to take a deep breath in, then deep breath out. Take another deep breath in, and another deep breath out. Focus on your body, focus on your mind, focus on your heart. Think about what is necessary for you to simply be in this moment. We understand that you all bring great value to your communities, to your families, to your friends, to this movement. We understand that there's a lot of things that may be heavy on your mind and heart as we speak. And just for a brief, temporary moment, we want you all to just focus on yourself and focus on this space. Take another deep breath in. Deep breath out. And as you are taking the time to stay focused on that person, that place, that animal, or that thing that makes you feel secure, that makes you feel whole, that makes you feel safe, I want you to think of what is necessary for you to hold on to that feeling for the moment that we have here today. And I also want you to think of what is necessary for you to hold on to that feeling as we depart from this space later on after the discussion. And when you all are ready, we want you all to make your way back to this space. Open your eyes slowly, take another deep breath, and simply just be.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. So thanks, folks, again for taking time to remember, recall, pay attention to the ways in which racism and white supremacy doesn't just impact our minds, but again, as Kevin was saying, impacts our hearts and bodies in very, very real ways too. And thinking about practicalities around bodies, also just want to remind folks, restrooms in the back, accessible restrooms in the back, also coffee, tea, water in the side room in case anybody needs it. Also, we are recording, just so you know, but the goal is to have that focus just on us up here. So we will try to keep you out of that as much as possible. Any other logistical things that we needed to touch on?
Yes. Okay, real quick, if anybody is for any reason feeling unwell, I would like for you to know that we do have a Medicare. Betty, can you raise your hand? Okay. And if you need any other type of support, please see any one of our staff support back along that wall there. And yeah, that's about it. Okay.
Well then, as we get going here, want to give everybody an opportunity to just introduce yourself to the group in the way that is most natural to you. Who are you? What brings you here?
Oh boy, why don't you introduce yourself and who are you?
Oh, okay.
What brings you here? And then we'll go.
So I am Matt Levine, and what brings me here is I'm a recovering racist. I don't know any other way to put it. Growing up as a white person in this society really socializes and conditions me into white supremacist, patriarchal, capitalistic framework that I think does nothing but harm BIPOC folks, harm the world, and ultimately harm myself. So I am somebody who has decided to commit my life to trying to do differently, and trying to heal and trying to repair the harm that I've done in the world. And so I do that by writing about racial justice. I run a podcast about racial justice. I'm a racial justice facilitator. And I am somebody who's basically just obsessed about talking about racial justice and trying to do better. And in that process, I have had the wonderful opportunity to meet and learn from lots of different folks, and I don't think there's anybody I've learned more from than Charlie. So when Charlie asked me to be a part of this, I said, fuck yeah, how the hell can I support you? And so that's what brings me here.
Thanks, Matt. So I introduced myself as Pulaski still is my indigenous name, but y'all can call me Charlie. Charlie Michelle Wesley, my colonizer name. And what brought me here today is such a long story, but I've always, like from the time I was probably 18 and started honoring picket lines. That was my first introduction to fighting injustices, right? And I always said that wherever there's injustice, there's something to do. And so I was at every possible protest I could get to, and I started taking my grandson to, and he was just little, like 6, and carrying a sign in front of the protest. And he even had his own protest at his middle school, Sunnyside Environmental School. So anyway, it's just incredibly important to do this work. I can't imagine doing any other work given my upbringing in this racist country, you know, from the time I was in the womb. And I just couldn't let that go, and especially once, you know, George Floyd got murdered, and they called us all out on the corner, so not just the big protests, but there were at least 6 different protests going on neighborhood corners. And so I wound up at the Rosa Parks Denver. And I've been there pretty much ever since. We have taken it on the road in different corners, but it just, when everybody else went home, I just couldn't imagine doing that. I often stood out there all by myself. Sometimes me and Matt stood out there by ourselves, me and Dan. All these folks you see in here are like comrades who have hung in there for years with the corner and with JFPK, you know, just not giving up. We have to keep this front and center, and if that just means a little corner and a little group like you all, that's what it takes. You know, sometimes it's one person at a time, and yes, I just can't imagine doing anything else. I am indigenous from the Grand Ronde Res, and you know, we have there's so much injustices going on in the BIPOC community, and we have all been like screaming it from the rooftops since our first terrorist, Christopher Columbus, and then stolen land, and then stolen people. We've been fighting for racial justice forever, and it's painstakingly slow to come around. And so what I'm hoping for is to start getting non-BIPOC people on board, and in a way that we can't fix a racist system when we're doing it with racist people. So they need to start looking at their own racism, privilege, entitlement. They have to start with themselves. They have to start with a personal inventory before they can really be effective in helping this country to become anti-racist, anti-oppressive. And it's just my passion now. Yes, I am willing to die for this. And it means a lot for my grandson, for his children, for the next generations. So, yeah.
brings you here?
Mic check, mic check. I'm used to that. Hello, everybody. I'm Letha. I'm Justice for Patrick Kimmons and all others, organizer and leader. I'm here today. I was invited to this panel by E. Steele, which is a close comrade of mine, fights for indigenous rights and Black Lives Matter. I'm here to tell you a little bit about my story, where I came from, where I'm at, where I'm going to end up at in my mission. I have a mission here in Portland, Oregon, and around the United States of America that a mission must be completed by any means necessary. So that is why I came here to support E. Steele and to support my organization and to support the community.
Thanks, Letha. Faith, what brings you here?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Faith. I am here from the invitation of Charlie, and Charlie could ask me to do anything and I would say yes. So I am a former member of the Police Accountability Commission, and Matt, I really like your story and your journey of healing. I'm also on a healing journey of overachieving. So I have been unlearning for a long time about striving and using the tools of white supremacy for striving. And now what does it look like for me to heal and use the skills that I do have in my own body and being present? And so it is a really complicated journey to unlearn. And so I'm here today to really talk about the work that we did on the Police Accountability Commission. I'm really deeply proud of the work that we did, and I'm also really devastated with where it's landed. And so excited isn't the right word. Holding with grief, being able to share about the work that we've done and hopefully invite others into participating to move the work forward. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Faith. Kevin.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Wright. I use he and his pronouns. And the reason why I'm here, it is because my friend and colleague, Matt, invited me to serve as one of the co-facilitators of this panel. Matt and I actually work together at the Center for Equity and Inclusion, which is literally a 5-minute walk down Alberta Street. So we get fortunately paid to do this work. And when we aren't getting paid to do this work, we are still just as heavily committed because of the fact that racial equity is not something that you just do 9 to 5. So therefore, we are always disrupting systems. We are always calling things in, calling things out. We are always trying to achieve certain deliverables and certain desired outcomes as best as we can through all types of systems. So we have the fortunate privilege of holding folks accountable that work in government affairs, foundations, sports team franchises, regional community foundations, the education sector. And I can't stress this enough. Racial equity work, racial justice work is needed everywhere. It's not just something that is specific to one particular system. I know we're going to be talking about police and law enforcement today, and just know that police and law enforcement needs this work, and so does everyone else. So in terms of my journey has been focusing on just going where the movement takes me. My journey has led me to do this work in Arizona, Oregon, Indiana, Ohio, Vermont. And when you think of the racial justice history or the covered up history of some of those states, you can probably start connecting the dots in terms of my journey has not been coincidental. I hail from Las Vegas, Nevada. I racially identify as Black and Native American, ethnically as Creole, with ties to the Louisiana Choctaw Indigenous Nation, and very happy to be in space with you all, very happy to have this conversation, and even more so, very curious to see where this will go, knowing that while having these conversations is very important, the next immediate step after the conversation is just as important. So I want folks to be mindful that, yes, having the conversations are important, and also changed behavior, follow-up action is also just as important. So thank you for inviting me, Matt.
Beautiful. Thank you for that, everybody. And so, yeah, as has been named, we want to get into talking about police accountability a little bit, and also the title of our event today is Radical Truth. And so we want to talk about radical truth, we want to talk about police accountability, and importantly, we really want to center folks' lived experience. And so really our first question here is, from your lived experience, what's the radical truth we need to hear about police accountability in Portland? Charlie, let's start with you.
Oh, so this answer will be the longest one in this series of 3 questions. So, you know, I don't have any like degrees, or I'm not a scholar, or, you know, like PhDs or any of that. Almost my entire education is around lived experience, around excessive and deadly force from the police, starting at a very, very young age. Watching, so I was raised in the hood, and I chose to live in the hood because that's where at least I felt safe despite the over-policing. And when I look back, and this is decades ago when I was a little girl, nothing's changed, it's gotten worse with the excessive and deadly force and how corrupt the cops are. And so when I was little, my mom, well, my dad was mentally ill. He had severe mental illness, and he would have episodes. And they were scary for sure, but like he wouldn't really hurt any of us. It's just frightening to see your father acting in such a strange way. And people would call the police on him. And he was a pacifist, right? And so a really gentle man. But they would literally just take him down and beat him up. And, you know, after so many times of that happening, you know why the natural human instinct is to fight, flight, or freeze, you know, and he would literally do whatever he could to get away from them because they were so violent. And that just made it worse for him. And watching that over and over and over, but that wasn't the extent of it, right? Living in the hood, you see neighbors, other family members, friends also be targeted and brutalized. So I don't like to, but I introduce myself as someone who was a witness to, a target of, a victim of, and a survivor of police excessive and deadly force. Yeah, I was shot at later on in life, but they missed, but which I'm surprised they didn't open fire from all of them. And the thing that I learned is that you don't have to break the law to be a target of the cops. You just have to live where you live, work where you work, drive what you drive, look like you look, or be in a neighborhood you're not perceived to belong in, or be sleeping, you know, in your own bed, or be a black child with a toy gun, you know, and I don't know how many years, maybe, Debbie, you know, this would be a good question for Dan, but we can't get him on here. He's on the police accountability with me and Faith. How many folks that the cops have killed here in Portland, and there has been no accountability. They literally get away with murder. And so as I grew up and continued to be a target and continued to be, have the knee in the back of my neck, to be beaten with their clubs, to be slammed against the wall and busting my face. And that was just for trying to tell my husband at the time, trying to calm him down. So they take me and slam me into the wall, been slammed on the hood of cars. I've lost count to how many times I look up and is surrounded by cops at gunpoint. Living in the hood as a person of color and being raised by an alcoholic mother and a schizophrenic father leads to a really challenging life. There was, I wasn't innocent later on, there was a lot of criminality, addiction, alcoholism, my own mental health issues, and I was, yes, in a gang. I was hanging out with, some other folks that we were traumatized in our lives. And we were just in survival mode constantly. And we were just living the only way that was shown to us by the people around us, the adults around us. And there was a lot of incarceration. But watching the police do this, I always felt like helpless to do anything about it, like just totally powerless over these situations. And as I became an adult, and I had gotten custody of my grandson by a miracle, literally, ICWA, if you haven't heard of it, if it wasn't for ICWA, they wouldn't have let me have him. It's an indigenous law that, they have to place Native children with family members, Native family members or other Native families. But so I got custody of him, and it was just heartbreaking. By now, because of him, I got clean and sober, and I got into recovery. And I had to unpack a lot of shit that went on in my life, but still unpacking it. 23 years clean and sober, and I still got such a shitload of trauma to work through. But what was so heartbreaking, I wanted to raise him and not have to go through everything that my family members and neighbors and friends went through. And so I got clean and sober, and I'm trying to do everything differently. But the one thing I couldn't do differently, when he became old enough to drive, to teach him how not to get killed by the cops. None of us should have to go through that raising children. You think you're gonna have the sex talk, right? Or something like that, but no. We have to, as BIPOC people, have that conversation with our BIPOC children, because it will happen just like that. Like, don't reach for anything. Keep your hands on the steering wheel. Tell them if you're gonna reach for the registration. Tell them you gotta reach into your pocket for your license. Don't make any quick moves. And then you worry about them the rest of their lives if they get pulled over, right? And so, on some level, George Floyd didn't realize that he was dying for huge change when it comes to police accountability, right? And so I did everything I possibly could. I got on the corners, I went to the protests, I got out the Measure 26-217 as far and wide as I could, which is, if you don't know, was passed with like 82% of the voters' votes, And I was like, finally, I'm kind of feeling some hope that maybe something is gonna change here. Call me naive, right? But had to try. And then they out of I don't know how many applications, they picked 20 of us. And they picked me for my lived experience. But what I didn't realize was, once I got into the system, and we're volunteers, so we're there of our own accord, but I just I experienced the barriers to getting any kind of accountability for the police, because not only do they not want to be held accountable, neither does the the city council and fucking Ted Wheeler. You know, they're just a bunch of fascists. Anyway, but I fought with my heart, soul, and mind on this commission. Damn it, you asked for lived experience and you're gonna get it. However raw, however emotional, whatever kind of fucking language I'm gonna use, you're gonna hear it. Because our voices are a fucking gift to you all. We bring a unique perspective. Without that perspective, you keep creating systems that harm us instead of help us. And you go against every one of your fucking core city values. Every one of these. They broke when they ended up gutting what we came up with. What we came up with is holding them accountable to community, not to each other, because then you know what happens. Nothing. Barely a slap on the hand. Oh, they get time off with pay. This is one of the most, this system, all systems, but this one is just the corroding thread of white supremacy is all they know. And that's how they function. They haven't changed a bit, it just looks a little bit different. And they're just plain out, they're murderers, they're liars, they're corrupt, and nobody can tell me there's a good cop in there, because if they were a good cop, they'd fucking quit, or they'd do something about it. So it was heartbreaking when we turned what we came up with, and I just tried my best to be the voice of community, and they just gutted all that out. And they would look at me with disdain, because they hated what I was saying, the radical truth, right? But I'm not done. That's not going to deter me. We stood out in front of Shitty Hall for, I don't know, a year or more, and just, you know, I'm not going to let them be comfortable. I'm not going to let people forget. I got to keep this front and center, and that's why we're having these events, and we're hoping we can expand on this. For all you all who haven't been in the streets, who haven't been on the corner, who haven't marched with Letha, or don't even know what happened to Measure 26217. I voted for it. What happened? Well, where were you when we were trying to push it across the finish line? Where were that 82%? Anyway. So that's kind of like, that's really it in a nutshell. They just avoid justice at all costs. And so I intend to get more involved in different ways of holding police accountable until we finally do away with it, because the answer is really, right now, Portland Street response. We need to get behind that big time. We need to take the cops' money, put it into Portland Street response, and fuck 12.
Yeah. Thank you, Charlie, for sharing your experience. Letha, I want to turn to you and ask the same question. From your lived experience, what...
So I have a question for you.
Yeah, please.
This is where we talk about the radical truth, I know, but the experience and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
This particular question. I'm going to keep it short, because anybody that know me know I can go a long way.
We're here for
Mic check, mic check.
We're here for it.
So, hi, hello everyone. My name is Juice. I prefer you to call me Juice instead of Letha, just because of the work I do out in the community. I am the organizer and leader of Justice for Patrick Kimmons and all others. Let me dive right in and tell you a little bit about me and what my mission here in Portland, Oregon is. So on September 30th of 2018, my son Patrick Kimmons was murdered, shot 9 times in the back by 2 officers here in downtown Portland. That is deadly force. To shoot anyone 9 times with no weapon in his hand. My number one goal here in Portland, Oregon is to get the Mayor Ted Wheeler to hold police accountable and get everyone else here to join me while I fight for our rights. The police has been murdering black people back to back and murdering of color the most. So we say, when is enough enough? Well, guess what? Enough is enough right now. The government and the police around United States of America has never done anything but step on our fucking necks. This has always been a broken system without accountability. This police brutality did not just start when they murdered George Floyd. This started years before that. This fight for justice has always been a fight. We are here to complete where Martin Luther King left off at. It is our goal. But not only is it our goal, it is a very important mission that we must continue and fight for justice to hold racist white people and police around United States of America accountable for their action. And I mean every last one of their actions. This government has taken our constitutional rights from us, and now they're trying to take our constitutional rights to be black. And that's facts. Again, when will enough be enough? Question mark right now. It's been time for us to stand up and fight back. If we don't stop judging one another by the color of our skin, the racism will never end. We must all come and stand together as one and as a nation and rise to the top and rebuild this broken system and move Ted Wheeler out of his seat and into the streets and make him feel the heat. Can we say no justice? Can we say no peace? They have shoved the houses into the streets, and now they're trying to remove them from having nowhere to sleep. Can we say no justice, no peace? I ask that if you know and feel where I'm coming from, then don't be scared to stand up and fight back. It is your right. Your action means a lot. If you care, take action now and fight back with us for justice. Please feel free to join me on Facebook or Instagram under Justice for Patrick Kimmons and all others. That's where you will find where our marches is as well as events. I look forward to talking with you and seeing you. If you have any questions, please feel free to talk with me after this. Thank you very much. I am Patrick Kimmons' mother. I'm not sure if you lost a child, but my son was 27 with 3 kids. Again, I'm not sure if you lost a child, but I have. I'm not sure if you walked up and to see somebody dead on the ground with 9 bullet holes. I have. I'm not sure if you was not called to identify your son. I have. I'm not sure if you had your son wallet taken out his pocket and destroyed, and he wasn't able to be identified by his wife or baby mother that was there. She have. I'm coming to you today to tell you that Black Lives Matter here, and they will always matter here. I'm also coming forward today to tell you that it is a great, great chance of us winning to rebuild a broken system. And I am honored to be sitting here today to get this invite by E. Steele to let you know what I've been through, what I'm going through, and what I'm getting ready to take you through. My mission here today is to let the world and the community know that I am here and I will not leave. I will die putting up a fight for Black Lives Matter. Indigenous, Antifa, homeless, everybody that put up a fight with me, I'm going to stand tall through it all. I know what I signed up for. I know what it came with. When they took my son away from me, they took almost everything I had. Power to the people, power to me. We must get them together as one. Each one teach one. Should have been more people here, but guess what? As JFPK organizing leader always say, a small crowd talk loud. Thank you very much.
There's JFPK flyers on every table with her contact information.
Thank you, Letha. Thank you for your voice. Thank you for your fight, your actions. Faith, Same question for you. What's the radical truth we need to hear about police accountability in Portland?
Wow. I needed to sit for a minute because that was very impactful. So my lived experience, I am Korean American from a working class family born with a neurological disability. And I worked very hard to make space for myself anywhere that I could find it. And areas of injustice that I saw, I wiggled my way in, and I thought, what tools do I have to work on this? So I went back to school for public policy, and in my brain, I like to joke and say I have bum legs but a good brain. And I thought, you know what, I can't, in my physical body, be on the corner, but I can use my brain to write thoughtful policy and inclusive policy. And I showed up to the Police Accountability Commission in 2021 is when we started, and I worked very hard. Anytime there was a chance to volunteer to write something, I volunteered. If we needed feedback, I got the feedback. When we had community events, I went to the events. And I made sure that folks who were impacted by police violence, that their stories were woven through the language and the policy that we wrote. And I think the thing that, the devastating thing that I've learned and that I've seen is that even when we use the tools that are available to us, in this case I'm talking about public policy, I also love math, and so I love to cite data, even when we use the tools that policymakers and decision makers are comfortable with, it doesn't matter. It doesn't convince them. And that those decisions are intentional. We don't have police accountability in Portland, and that's an intentional decision by City Council. It's not an accident. They will say that there are too many considering factors. We have not experienced justice, and that's not accidental, that's intentional. And so I think I'm here today with my lived experience, maybe very clearly exhausted in my racial justice journey, burnt out in my racial justice journey, and also I think making an invitation for folks to understand that it's not an accident, that holding on to power is a choice. And the decision makers in this city especially are continuing to choose to hold on to power. And I say that with a lot of grief, and I say that as someone who still believes that we can change things through policy and through data and through storytelling, and I say that as someone who will continue to dedicate my life to this work, and I also say that as someone who's incredibly exhausted. I think as maybe many of us are in our racial justice work, and with an invitation. So I'm now 41, which, and I have younger people who are like, how do you do this? How do you participate? And there is nothing more meaningful to me than to have someone who's younger say, how do I participate? Or how do I get invested? Or maybe I've never been invested in racial justice work, or I've never even considered police accountability. It feels to me that when my cup is empty and when I have nothing left in my brain, that fills it up. It gives me life to keep going, and I think a very important component, and maybe why Charlie hand-selected the presenters today, are like very clearly there are three very different human beings on the stage sharing our lived experience. And I think when we're talking about the movement that each experience, we need each other, of I can't write thoughtful policy without the lived experience of Charlie and the stories of Juice and all of your hard work. And likewise, I would love to take that labor on for you. And so how do we do that together? So yeah, that's a little of my lived experience that brought me here.
Thank you so much. Again, thank you, Faith. Thank you for your voice. Thank you for your work. And thank you for that honesty about the exhaustion you're feeling, because I definitely think that's something a lot of us are experiencing. So what we can do to be there for each other in that exhaustion, I think, is such an important thing for us to think about. And with that in mind, we have already heard a lot of important things with a lot of emotions behind them, a lot of potential trauma behind them as well. So we did want to just give folks here a quick 5 minutes to check in with yourselves, check in with each other. What's landing with you so far? What's reflecting? What are you reflecting on? If there's anything, we won't have like an out-and-out question and answer session, but if there's anything you would like for Kevin and I to bring up to the panelists, there are index cards on your seats. You can write something down over this 5 minutes. But yeah, we'll take 5. It's 4:10 right now. We'll start back up at 4:15. Take care of yourselves.
All right, folks, thank you so much for indulging us in that brief break. We really do appreciate you all checking in with yourselves, checking in with each other. And now we want to continue the conversation with the next portion of our panel discussion. And one of the things that we want folks to understand and realize is that in this work that we call racial equity, racial justice, in these multiple intersectional movements that we are engaged in, there's multiple ways to go about seeking justice, liberation, and empowerment and progress. And sometimes, unfortunately, Matt and I, we've had the experience where a person will unfortunately think that, oh, well, your way isn't like my way in this movement, so therefore, how can we truly be in solidarity if we're not thinking the exact same way? There's folks that do this work through policy, as you heard. There's folks that do this work because they're in the streets. There's folks that are at the protests. There are folks who are at the Capitol. There are folks who are on social media. There are folks who are doing things within a very specific and nuanced and siloed community. And at the same time, all of that work is important. All of that work is valuable. And at the same time, we can't lose sight of the fact that this is everyone's responsibility, not just a select few. And therefore, solidarity is very crucial and very key to achieving that progress. So with the panelists in mind, my next question for you all to share some wisdom and gems on is, how can solidarity be maintained during times of internal disagreement within social justice movements?
Okay. Yeah, this is a really good question. So I want to talk a little bit about the Police Accountability Commission in this context. So there were 20 of us, so 20 community organizers, policy writers, math nerds, folks with lived experience, people who've been working on police accountability for their whole careers. And while we all had the same goal for more police accountability, you can imagine that a virtual room of 20 people didn't always agree on how to make that goal realized. And we decided every single word of this 500-page document that we handed to City Council, we would decide in consensus, so that we had to agree on the whole document together. And so it was painstaking, and honestly, I think for anyone, a normal person, very boring, like very tedious work. to be like, this is quite literally how we hold police accountable. Here are all the mechanisms, here's the way it would work out. And there were many disagreements among us. It wasn't like there were things that we agreed upon very easily, but there were things that many of us didn't felt polarized in how to make it work. And I think there were a couple of things to me that are very important in racial justice work. And one of them is that this is a principle out of disability justice work. It is that the person who is the most impact, or the person who experiences oppression, that they're held at the center of equity work. And so in the disability justice space, what that looks like is for folks of color who are disabled, for folks of color who maybe don't use words or have intellectual disabilities or experience significant support needs with autism, that they're held at the center. And when you hold, and I think in racial justice, this is really like, I'm getting into nerd shit now, but this is targeted universalism. So we're saying the person who's impacted the most, we hold them at the center. And our policy and our decision making all considers, if we think of this person at the center, it needs to work for them. And if it works for them, then it works for the rest of us. And so I think when we're talking about, for us in the Police Accountability Commission, I think what I hope we were eventually able to do is that, especially from folks who had lived experience with police violence, of if we're disagreeing, if we hold you at the center, if we hold folks of color at the center who have been historically marginalized over and over, deliberately experience violence at the hands of police, if we hold them at the center of this organizing work, and we slow down and we think, does this work for them? Then I think that kind of makes all the other bullshit just like, none of it matters anymore when we're able to center that. And I want to speak to someone from the audience asked a question, which I'll read, is how did the anarchist movement kind of take over the BLM movement in PDX streets? Is that true nationwide? How do we welcome all and ensure Black, Indigenous voices are centered? It's a great question, and I think, yeah, of course this happened in 2020. I mean, I don't know, this is not a yes or no question, but the answer to me is yes. Like, did the anarchist movement kind of take over? Yeah, and I think a lot of narratives, and I think we, what was the Portland Mom Block, that narrative for the first time of people seeing white women taking up space in protests, and how for a minute people were like, yeah, white women are taking up space. And then for a second being like, whoa, wait a second, white women are taking up all the space. And I think that to this question, I think of the same principle in disability justice, if we're holding, and so I would invite folks from the anarchist movement to adopt this same principle, is if you're holding the communities that are the most impacted by oppression in the center, and you're considering that first, then all the other bullshit is it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. And I think for me, I'm a very loud, confessed, recovering overachiever. I like to write things clear and strong and obsessively, and my personal preference doesn't fucking matter. It's not about me. And I think that in racial justice movements, especially for non-Black, non-Indigenous, people of color, and white people, it's not about me. So I may have an opinion about how to move something forward, but honestly, it's not about me and my opinion. And me centering myself, I have a lot of access to white spaces. I'm disabled, but I have a lot of access to able-bodied places. So when I'm in those spaces, it's about who has experienced historical oppression here, and how do I create space for them. I think of it especially, I don't know, we're about to go into the Olympics, and I don't know what this sport is called. I think it's actually a winter sport. But the thing where they're curling, where they're like shuffling and then someone pushes the ball. I obviously I'm a sports person, but for folks who are not Black, who are not Indigenous, who don't have lived experience of oppression, it's like all of our jobs to be the people who are doing the broom work, to clearing the space. And so I think about that when we talk about movements, is that it's my job with my disabled body to be using that broom as fast as I can so that folks with lived experience are able to be centered and for them to score the point, right? Like the whole system is already set up for folks of color to not score the points, so it's my job to be there doing the little broom shit to make it happen.
Could you repeat the question too, because I wish I had an answer to it.
This one?
Kevin?
Yes, the question was, how can solidarity be maintained during times of internal disagreement within the movement? And I know that we're talking about in the context of the police accountability. So yeah, how can solidarity be maintained during times of internal disagreement?
So if we're talking about Police Accountability Commission, that actually, yeah, with all the times we did disagree on things, it wasn't as excruciating as what I see out in the streets in the movement. It just fucking doesn't seem like there's a good answer to this. I've tried to suggest some things, but it just feels like, until everybody starts doing their own internal work, we just keep bouncing around and trying to do our own thing and stepping on each other's feet and canceling people, and it's just been very disappointing, and I don't have an answer yet. And it's heartbreaking, and it just kind of dashed a lot of hope. And I feel like, mainly because of white supremacy and people not doing their own internal work around their racism, equality, and privilege, and the blindness that brings, because it's so deeply embedded in this country that it's kind of destroyed the movement. And it's moved on to the next thing, so they don't have to think about Black Lives Matters and racial justice. And, but anyway, just real quick, don't have an answer yet. We got to still be working on that. So somebody asked, what's up with the Police Accountability Board now, and what's up? How can we see what we get, what we voted for? So what happened was, once we turned it over to City Hall and the city attorney, and they gutted it, and then it went to a judge, Simon, and he approved that it's okay to go on to the Department of Justice. And so it's with the Department of Justice now. And as a matter of fact, I wasn't accepting that, and neither was Matt. So we wrote a letter to the Department of Justice attaching what we came up with and compared it to what the city handed off to them, and a cover letter as to why they need to relook at what we came up with. Is she okay? There's a website. Okay, these little brochures you have on your seats, there's a lot of resources there. There's the city's website that will take you to the copy we came up with, the copy the city turned over to Department of Justice, everything you want to know about the Police Accountability Commission, there's actually videos of it going back to the very first meeting. There's everything you can ever want to know, but also there's our email on there. If there's additional questions or things you want to know about it, feel free to email us. But that's where it is right now. The PPA, police union and cops and city council, you might as well say, they're trying to write a measure to undo what's left of it and just turn everything back basically to the way it was, in a nutshell, kind of. Worse than the way it was, yeah. So, you want to add to that at all, Faith?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think that there are a couple of our friends here from the Police Accountability Commission who are really involved still in organizing. So our friend Dan Handelman from Cop Watch, I think that's a tremendous way to stay organized. And Debbie Iona's here from the League of Women Voters. And I think getting connected to other people who are, there's, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but there's lots of ways to be involved with police accountability. There's like the nerd shit, and then there's, which I'm saying with affection because I like to participate in the nerd shit. So there's that aspect of organizing, and then there's organizing by making your voice heard and talking to your friends about it and posting about it on social media or making invitations to talk about it at dinner with people who might be uncomfortable talking about police accountability. I think one of the things that's really hard in this city right now is that there's a new rhetoric around safety, that Portland has gone to hell and we need safety, and in order to get safety, we need more cops, and cops don't want to work here if they're held accountable, which is, like, to me, the most nonsensical line of thinking, and deliberately nonsensical of, there's no good cops. And if there were, wouldn't you want to be good at your job? So wouldn't you want accountability? Like, so my logical brain, obviously, there's no logic. Anyway, right. And so I think Charlie brought up earlier of investing your time into focusing on Portland street response or ways in which we're supporting folks with mental illness. So when we're talking about policing, I think one of the things, it's become so polarized now in our city that if you are pro holding police accountability, that you're anti-public safety. And that rhetoric is so dangerous. And I think that we will see that more this fall from our mayoral candidates and our new city council. And so I think as much as you can dispel that public safety, like the number one question for me is when we're talking about safety in the city of Portland, safe for whom? Because for folks of color, we're saying this isn't safe. And you're saying all of a sudden white people are feeling uncomfortable, and now we need to talk about what safety looks like, and that looks like more policing. And so I think the invitation is talk to lots of folks who are involved in the nerd shit and the policy stuff, and also do what you can interpersonally with your own communities and changing the rhetoric of the way we're talking about safety in this city right now.
Yeah, thank you both for that so much, and I just wanted to add to that too. One of the resources on the back of that sheet you've got there is the Friends of Portland Street Response, and one of the things that Friends of Portland Street Response is doing right now, they have a candidate pledge that they're trying to get people who are running for the new city council to say that they support Portland Street Response and continuing to fund Portland Street Response. So inform yourself, what are the candidates that are running for the new city council? What are they doing about Portland Street Response? What are they doing about the Community Board for Police Accountability? The Portland Police Association, the union for the Portland Police Bureau is trying to get, again, an initiative on the ballot to undo all of the phenomenal work that Charlie and Faith and their comrades did on the community, on the Police Accountability Commission. So we need to absolutely defeat that initiative. We need to get folks in city council who aren't throwing around this absolutely ludicrous, absolutely racist, absolutely anti-democratic refrain that tear gas Teddy and racist ass Renee keep spouting, which is it's not 2020 anymore. So we need to let our city councilors know that 2020 wasn't the beginning of white supremacy in this country. 2020 wasn't the beginning of white supremacy in this city. And also 2020 wasn't the beginning of a revolution against that white supremacy. That's been happening for 532 years, and it's about damn time we actually get on top of that and do something about it.
Yeah.
And so with that idea of sort of doing something about it, we did want to close out here. And frankly, Kevin, if you have any thoughts on this, I'd be curious to know what they are as well. Our sort of last question is, so what's next for you in terms of racial justice work? And what's next for us? What would you like to see, those of us who are here listening to what you've got to say? What do you want to see from us in terms of a racial justice movement in this city, in this country? What are you doing next in terms of racial justice in this city, in this country? How can we build, right? Not just sustain, how can we build this revolution for a racially just world?
Yeah, just to start us off, something that I would say, and this kind of complements the previous question. Many times when we are navigating through different movements, sometimes we are navigating through these movements with a different lens and a different framing of the language that we're even using. So what I mean by that is when we talk about the Police Accountability Commission, I want to make sure that folks are taking the time to check for clarity, to demand specificity, and actually understand what do we mean when we say holding police accountable. What does accountable mean in that context? Are we talking about reformation? Are we talking about defunding and divestment? Are we talking about burning it all down, right? If the answer is yes to all three, then we need to be strategic. Because I have seen too many times where people will come into a movement and they'll hear a word such as dismantle, accountability, divestment, defunding, and they'll lead with their own understanding of that word without taking the time to understand what do we mean in this very moment in this movement. Like for me, if I actually lived physically in Portland and was more engaged in this work and could be more engaged in this work, the first thing I would do is go to Charlie and ask, hey, we're talking about police accountability. What do you mean? What do the leaders mean when we say accountability? Because I want to make sure that I am complimenting your work and honoring the legacy of your work and your family and your leaders and your comrades instead of imposing on the work. I'm not here to take over. I'm not here to shine, right? I'm not here to claim my 15 minutes of fame. I'm here to add on to the labor that has already been tirelessly given to this movement. I'm trying to make it move forward. I'm trying to be the bigger person, not the bigger problem, right? So therefore, it is very crucial for us to think about how we are truly being strategic with how we engage in these movements and are also checking for clarity about what is meant when we say hold accountable, because I have seen it go far left, far right, and all of the way around to the point where we're taking 5 steps back instead of 10 steps forward. So that is something that I always strive to do, is I always try to make sure that I am in alignment with the vision that folks are trying to bring into reality, to make sure that like, hey, how am I making sure that I am bringing your vision to the forefront? How am I leading with your vision at the forefront? And how am I centering the folks that we are talking about in these conversations to make sure that I'm not losing sight of those people and rather just trying to advance things with ulterior motives? So that is something that I would add to start us off.
Okay. What's next for me? Well, I very candidly am experiencing burnout. So what's next for me is some really good care for myself, and also acknowledging that in the movement, folks get burnt out. And so I'm trying to be a vulnerable leader by telling people of my burnout, that it happens and that it's real, and that it means that my brain is moving slow, I'm not responding to texts as quickly. When I would normally have ideas to innovate or be strategic, my brain is like molasses. And so being honest with where I'm at, I think, and for my invitation for other folks who are learning and unlearning on their racial equity journey, is that they're being honest with where they're at. So that's my first invitation of how you're coming into the work and how much space you have and what space you don't have. And particularly for folks of color to be able to acknowledge that for themselves. I think one of the ways that I can still show up as I'm in burnout is through the community that I have and the people that I'm committed to. So I'm committed to this work, and I'm also committed to my colleagues. So Charlie could invite me anywhere, and I literally would say yes in the midst of my burnout, because I'm committed to having worked alongside you for 2 years. And so I think that that doesn't feel, I may not be committed to every new person I meet, but I have this long-standing history now with a human being that I deeply trust in my own racial equity work, and I trust their work in equity spaces. And so even in the midst of burnout, I think it's looking to the people that you trust and that have energy, and that you can say, yeah, I absolutely will come alongside you and support you however I can. Right now I'm very involved in union organizing, so that's something that I'm in the middle of, that I hope, said with love, hope to be out of soon, because I'm, like I said, burnt out, and there's nothing more exhausting than honestly union organizing. So that's what's next for me, and then I will always be at the table with police accountability in the city of Portland. So there are things to be watching for. The way that we had written, so I appreciate sort of this, when we're talking about police accountability, what we're specifically talking about is a response to Measure 26217, which is a very technical new system that says if you have been harmed by police, here are the steps that you would go through to file a complaint, and here's how the police would be held accountable. And you would be involved in the process, and the community would be the deciders of holding police accountable. So I'm sorry that I wasn't more specific about that, but that's the very small of the criminal injustice system. That's the very small piece that we're talking about. And that, as Charlie mentioned, is still with the DOJ. But that could potentially come back to City Council as soon as maybe November. And so paying attention and being at City Council to provide public comment, to look to leaders like Charlie and say, hey, is this bullshit or is this something we're down with? Like, where are we at? And centering those voices who have lived experience of police violence in Portland and saying like, hey, are we on board with this? And checking in with them to really gut check how we participate. I think those are ways that we can, this is like such a small part of police accountability, but this is a critical component, is that if you're harmed by police, you know what will happen to you, and that police officer would be held accountable. So that's what's next.
What's next? So I intend to show up at anything that has to do with this new system, and do whatever it takes to do public testimony with radical truth and with my lived experience and with what I experienced on this Police Accountability Commission. And so someone told me when they heard me speak here before at a different event, they were like, we were trying to get something on a measure on the ballot like 20 years ago, and it didn't make it anywhere, right? It didn't go anywhere. And he goes, so I want you to at least recognize that it got on the ballot this time in 2020. There are some changes coming, but not what we want. You know, this is like, what did you call it? Long game, yeah.
Marathon.
Marathon, okay. And so I get that. You know, we're not going to change this shit overnight. And I think one of the huge barriers is, though, again, we can't fix racist systems with racist people in there. And the only way to get out of that is like, we're going to vote for a bunch of new people, great, to be on city council. But are they anti-racist? You know? Were they supporting Portland Street Response before they were running for city council and not just sign on for it now? These are the things we got to look into. Like, we can't just vote for somebody because they got a D behind their name and think they're the party of the people, because that's bullshit, and we're learning that the hard way. You know, we got such a racist city, okay, we got racist city council and people who are supporting racism in it. Anyway, so next steps is to just be at every meeting I can be at. I am absolutely going to get on board with Cop Watch more, because they got all the dirt on the cops and they use it against them. And I so appreciate that. What, 30 years of records, detailed records, what cops have done what, and what they get away with. And there have been some changes because of what Cop Watch does. They hate Dan Handelman, who is a founder, because he's always showing up and talking shit. Basically, that's how I word it, about the cops, because that's practically all we have to say about them. Anyway, I just want to stay involved and stay at it and try my best to make some change. But what I wanted to tell you was to call you all into action too. Like, y'all voted probably for 26-217, but literally, where were you when we were trying to get it over the finish line? Where was that public testimony? Where was that demand for them to do what we voted for? And why? You know, we can't just vote and let it go and hope these fucks do something about it, because you see what happens. There's plenty of resources in that little brochure for you. It's not just for you to read or watch or listen to. It's going to tell you the work you need to do. And it starts with you. It starts with each and every one of you. That's why, you know, I appreciate Matt so much and doing his work as a white male in this society. You know, it gives me hope to see white people actually doing that work. It's like maybe someday, and, you know, wish it would happen before I died, but I just want to know we're moving in that direction. But I wanted to say something else. Yeah, the brochure. Oh, please. I would love to hear or see your commitment to, what does it say?
So outside in the side room on this wall here, there's a yellow banner that says, "What's your role in creating a racially just world?" So we would love to have folks share what you're feeling after our time together today. Because again, none of us do this just for the sake of doing it. None of us are up here for the sake of being up here. We're up here because we want to create a radically different world than the one we live in. And so want to think about, and I include myself in this, what am I doing differently based on the last couple hours we've spent together? What's actually going to change in my behavior? What actual steps are we going to take to do better? So would love to have folks share that on our board together.
Yeah, and I'm going to introduce an amazing poet in just a second, but I'd also like to say when he's done, we'll still have about 30 minutes for you all to check everything out, write on the banner, watch the picture slide, and then there's some videos of those of us that have been on the corner, many of us for years, right? So please don't miss out. And with that, I think it's time, right? I can't wait. So first, I want to tell you, I want to introduce Ty Brack, Portland-based slam poet. In 2023, Ty represented Oregon in the National Poetry Slam. He needs and finished as number 10 ranked poet in the nation. Yeah. So believe it or not, I met Ty at a protest. What do you know? It was the teachers protesting down along Waterfront, and it was about teach truth. So I sat through a million speeches from the teachers, and they were all great, you know, like they're going to teach truth. But then Ty got up there and started his poetry. And I said, who the hell is this guy? I got to find out and see if maybe he'll come to the corner. And he did. I mean, he will blow you away. And he would come to the corner and recite his poetry. And I just feel very honored that he'd come to our little corner and do that. And I thank you so much, Ty. And here he is at our event now. So, Ty Brack.
Test. Thank you so much. And it's been a minute since I've been able to see Charlie. Life has been rather wild for my family, but I'm glad to be here listening to just the tremendous amount of knowledge that they just dropped on us was very, very heartwarming, especially as we all, I think, are feeling that exhaustion that Faith was talking about, because it just seems like we continuously get beaten down, even though we're fighting every day. So a couple of poems that I wrote, I've kind of melded together for this event, and hopefully they sort of sum things up here, but also knowing that, when I write these poems specifically about racial justice, I'm writing from the standpoint where I'm speaking to myself and also to other white people. As poets, it's very important that we speak about what we know and make sure that we're not trying to tell stories that aren't ours, right? So that's what these are, and I'll just let the poems speak for themselves after this. All right, here we go. The stolen land shadow, the stolen water shadow, the stolen farming techniques shadow, the stolen crops shadow, the stolen medicine shadow, the stolen bodies to cultivate the stolen crops for profit shadow, with only white access to the stolen medicine and water shadow, the stolen human rights to dictate how to protect and serve shadow, the stolen families lynched to uphold the laws of white supremacy shadow, the stolen votes shadow, the stolen paths to property ownership shadow, the stolen neighborhood shadow, the stolen microphone shadow, the stolen pen shadow, the stolen lens shadow, the stole so much we got swollen hands shadow. When we realize our whiteness is casting these shadows, conniving to cancel our shadows without first dismantling them is a means to self-righteous absolution in another savage stunt to save our whiteness like it deserves saving. On August 12th, 2017, Heather Heyer placed her white privilege in the middle of white supremacist chaos, joining the only good side, facing down the terrorist onslaught. When the vehicle of white supremacy struck, her spirit, strengthened by the spirits of those on the good side, struck back, sending the vehicle racing in reverse and into a corner where it could be dismantled, its parts used for identifying and destroying, defects in future vehicles. Before joining the good side that day, Heather Heyer's final Facebook post read a familiar refrain: "If you're not outraged, you're not paying attention." In January of 2024, a group of white people calling themselves social justice volunteers pushed their privilege to the absolute front of a women's march, permitted by the city, escorted by police. One of the members in this social justice volunteer group lifted their cell phone, snapped a selfie, and posted it to Facebook. The picture, angled down, forced the perspective to make each person behind the group smaller and smaller and smaller until the existence of those behind the group cut off. The person who posted the picture commented, "We started the Women's March today. We were so far in front, even the cops were following us, LOL. Smiley face, power fist, hashtag Biden 2024. So, woke whiteness. The question is, do we know the difference? And that's a question for when we say Kendrick Lamar is our favorite rapper, for when we are told an event is a BIPOC-only space. Do we know the difference? It's a question for when we name our sons and dogs after Atticus Finch, for when we get a 23andMe kit that says we have 1/128th indigenous ancestry without considering that that just means that one of our fathers was probably a rapist. Do we know the difference? It's a question for when we read the names of children killed by police and then we still vote yes on that next public safety bond. For when we call Trump a Cheeto, for when we educate non-white people about the dangers of not voting for Biden, for when we read about terrorized malls, festivals, nightclubs, protests, schools, nightclubs, festivals, malls, protests, schools, malls, festivals, protests, nightclubs, schools. So woke whiteness, do we know the difference between the social justice volunteer group and Heather Heyer? Do we know the difference between proliferating the white savior industrial complex and being an accomplice in the dismantling of the white heterosexual cisgender male supremacy? Woke whiteness, do we know? We have to know. It's no longer a question. Thank you.
Oh, no, you all need to get on his website, which is also, is it on our, oh, shit. Oh, man, okay, and hear the rest of his stuff. It's phenomenal. Indoctrination, and The Other Shadow, and yeah, oh my gosh, blow you away. Anyway, so thank you all so much, Hayumasi, many thanks in my language for showing up, and I want to thank all of the staff support, did a phenomenal job in getting this set up. Is it okay if I use your names, y'all? If not, raise your hand. Okay, so we got Moss and Poppy. Yay! Did an amazing job on making all our videos run on loop on the TVs. I'm just like blown away. Anyway, and then we got Thorn, who assisted with the AV. Yay, Thorn! And we got D-Link or Dan in the AV room there running the projection. And then we got our staff support, Jordy, right here, looking all badass as usual. And Betty, our medic. Did I say we had a medic? Okay, good. Okay, yeah, there she is. Thank you, Betty, so much. And then we have Redwood, our other badass staff support person. Woohoo! And, oh, Beth, you're not going to hide. I'm not going to let you hide. Yeah, she did. She helped with setting up all these tables with Betty, and I thank you so much. You did a great job. And they put up all these banners, y'all. Matt and Redwood did those. Moss also helped set up signs with donuts. Where are you? There he is. So love you all, and please, take your time and look around. We may start taking down some of the banners, though, because we are supposed to be out of here by a certain time. Well, actually, not till 6, so we got time. Anything else? What did I forget?
I just want to thank, definitely, Kevin. Thank you so much for being here with us. Yes. Faith, too, thank you so much for being here with us. Letha had to leave us, but Letha, thank you so much for being here with us. And I very, very intentionally want to leave our last thanks for Charlie, because this, I can't even begin to name how much went into this event and how much you put into this, how much of yourself, and how much you put into this community. So thank you from the bottom of my fucking heart. Thank you for being you. Thank you for showing up as you every day. Thank you for doing everything you did for this event. Yeah.
No, back at you. Okay, ditto all that. But, I have one announcement. My grandson Dylan and his now fiance Casey got engaged last night at the Sunset. They're right here. So, I want a great grandchild.
Yes, documentation. You guys didn't see that. I'm a really good taper. I didn't see shit. I could be a really good taper. Pass it around. This is more of the leaning side. I have a whole room with like, Yeah, good idea. Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah. Not a PDX. Not even a job. It's like a 3D printer, but you just stick your arm in there. It doesn't hurt at all. Promise. It can't be that bad. Yeah. What's that Tesla? Oh, it is Tesla. Yeah. Do they remember what that was? What's that?
They parked all these cyber trucks in this like back lot somewhere, and like every one of them got fuck you on schedule.
Yeah. Oh, damn. I just see that. Yeah, that's good.
And 40 of them doesn't sound like a lot, but when there's only 4,000 in existence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're showing up in Portland now.
Yeah, nothing is able to ridiculous. That's one of those photos behind me, and it's like, oops.
I hate the giant, they have one giant beach.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was the thing that stuck out to me the most.
It's like everything about it has to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah, we ended up with a lot of leftover. But some of you guys are really used to park.
That's good.
I didn't get your faces.
It makes me feel, I think, every time, and a lot of times I feel like I don't
time to do this today. I'm feeling good, and I come down, and this protest helps uplift me because it helps me. It reminds me that I'm not the only one out here. You know, that I'm not the only one who cares about these issues. It's one thing when there's 10,000 people in the street, and of course we need that. We need more of that. But then to have a small group of people who are still doing it just reminds me people still care. People drive by all the mornings and older, you know, and some people don't like it. And there's meaning in that too. So that's why we're here to speak truth to power.
Yeah, it's like, I think it's right there. I feel like someone. There. That's cool, man. Yes, documentation. You guys didn't see that. I'm a really good taper. I didn't see shit. I think you're a really good taper. Did you get a tattoo?
Not PDX.
Not even a job.
It's like a 3D printer, but you just stick your arm in there.
It doesn't hurt at all. Promise.
I can't do that for us. Yeah. What's that Tesla?
Oh, it is.
Tesla. Yeah. Did you know what that was?
I don't know what it is.
What's that?
They park all these cyber trucks in this like back lot somewhere, and like every one of them got fuck you on a red on wood.
Yeah. Oh, damn, I didn't see that. Yeah, that's good.
And 40 of them doesn't sound like a lot, but when there's only 4,000 in existence, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
You know, what's
They're showing up in Portland now.
Yeah, nothing is able to just ridiculous crime. That's one of those in front of behind me and just like, oops. Oh.
I hit the giant, they have one giant inch.
oh, really?
Yeah, that was the thing that stuck out to me the most.
It's like everything about it has to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah, we ended up with a lot of left winger. But some of the guys are really used to park.
That's good.
I didn't get your faces.
So yeah, so I just, it makes me feel, I think, you know, every time, a lot of times I feel like I don't have time to do this today, or I'm feeling good, and I come down and this protest helps uplift me because it helps me, it reminds me that I'm not the only one out here, you know, that I'm not the only one who cares about these issues. It's one thing when there's 10,000 people in the street, and of course we need that, we need more of that, but then to have a small group of people who are still doing it just reminds me that people still care. People drive by